All right, well, let's get going. And once again, we want to welcome you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. I know, especially those of you who are nonprofit workers, are very busy and have lots on your plate. So we appreciate that you take time to join us here today. I'm really, really excited about the webinar we're going to be doing today, and we have a very special guest who I will introduce to you in just a minute when I get my slides going here. Okay. And of course, some of you who have joined us before know I'm Dan Kimball with Aplos. I'm a product specialist here and a longtime fundraiser here in my community. And I love to share tips and suggestions about how to do fundraising. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. But what I'm really excited about is to introduce to you all a really good friend of mine, Jill Wagner. We'll tell you about more about her in a second. But just as a reminder, we love Twitter here at Aplos. So if you are a Twitter user and you either can ask questions, you can interact on Twitter using the hashtag Aplos webinar. And of course, I can be found at Fugitive DMK. That's FUGATIVE DMK. That's my Twitter handle. And we like to use the hashtag Aplos webinar. We have a guy here in our office who is monitoring Twitter, just putting out content, answering questions, all of that. So, of course, I'm going to let Jill, when I introduce her, tell you a little about her. We're not going to read her whole bio, but we are so thrilled to have somebody with such wisdom and expertise and all of that to join us. So welcome, Jill Wagner.
Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here and talk about growing your nonprofit. I've been in marketing, as you can see on that, for a really long time. So I have the secrets of the past in my repertoire here. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. You could read more about me later if you're ever interested.
Yeah. So before I kind of turn it over to Jill, I just kind of want to remind people, of course, in the past number of months, we've been talking a lot about fundraising, different tips about fundraising, but we're going to kind of change it up a little bit. Even though this has to do with fundraising, what we're really going to be talking about is the marketing side of it. And we've had a lot of questions in the past of how do you get your nonprofit more known? How do you get your name out there? And this is why I'm so thrilled to have Jill coming in. Jill, as you saw in her bio, has a long history with marketing. I've personally had the opportunity to work with Jill in one of my past nonprofit jobs, and just really thrilled that she's taken the time to be here. And so with that, I'm going to kind of turn it over to Jill.
So I just wanted you to know, in addition to communications, I've been in your shoes. I ran a nonprofit education foundation for 10 years, and I've worked and consulted in the nonprofit world here and there, as well as government, for-profit, before I started my own firm. And you can see the logo for my firm, Idea Emporium. That's in Fresno, California. And so this isn't going to be a seminar on 10 steps to communication greatness or some marketing for dummies thing, because you're not dummies. And it's more complex than just 10 easy steps. And so I hope that doesn't make you cry. But what I want to give you is a process to follow that will serve you now and in any job you could ever have, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit world. But it's a process to follow to achieve your goals. And so communication is key. And I think these are some of the questions I hear in working with nonprofits, and I won't read them all, but the main one is, how do we get people to know about us? And why aren't people aware of what we're doing? Because we're really important and we're doing important work, and we just want folks to know and care, just like we care about our cause. And so another one we hear is, how we're the best kept secret. And if you're a best kept secret, it's because the communication to the key target audiences isn't taking place. So I think we're going to address that today. So I think a lot of the issues I deal with in nonprofits, whether it's related to them growing a donor base or their success at campaigns and everything, a lot of it goes back to communications, because communications is on the side, but communications needs to run alongside your work. And even if you're not a professional communicator, I'm going to give you some tips so you can pretend like you are and get the results you want. But remember, without just people knowing isn't enough. There's awareness, like, oh, I know who you are. There's agreement, like, I know who you are and I like you. And then you've got to get to action. And so that's them doing what you want to do, or you want them to do. So we're going to talk about that.
Well, the other thing, too, I want to just kind of remind people or kind of encourage you all that I know a lot of times people think, well, we're a small nonprofit, and we don't have the budget of a big marketing budget. And I'm just really want to encourage you to really tune in, because I think Jill's gonna really help us understand that you don't have to necessarily have a huge marketing machine to
Right.
to be a good marketer.
And honestly, there's been very few places where I've had what I would consider a reasonable budget to get the work done. It's been begging and borrowing, stealing, and doing my OPM, which is other people's money, running around to different departments saying, I'm trying to get this communication initiative done. Can I have $5,000? And I'd run around to a bunch of different departments until I got the funds that I needed. So it's a thing, but it's not the most important thing, because your most important thing is to share your mission. Your most important thing isn't spending money. It's what you're doing related to your mission. So we're going to talk about why this is important. And in communications, you have highly focused plans and different approaches that you'll change through time based on what works and what doesn't, and then having realistic expectations. I want to talk about that a minute. The more people you have trained to carry your message, the better, rather than just you doing it. And it's like, oh, I'm running around to everybody I see. I'm at the grocery store and the gas station and in my service clubs, and I'm talking about it. But the best thing you can do is deputize and ambassador people so that they can carry your message for you. Everybody needs to be engaged in your communications process. It's not just you. It's your donor developers. It's your volunteers. It's your board member, staff, whoever. Once your communications plan is kind of set, involve everybody. And much like targeting donors, it's key that communications are targeted. Think of how many messages come at you a day. I mean, hundreds and hundreds. I think they even said thousands that you're exposed to today, whether online, billboards, radio, podcasts. I mean, there's messages everywhere. And how do you cut through that clutter and so that you're heard and so that your message is heard? So what I wanted to say about the realistic expectations is, let's say today you come up like there's 5 key communication things you want to do. I would say, don't do them concurrently. Start with one. Because if you launch 5 initiatives at the same time, it's too hard to measure which one worked and which one didn't. There's just not a way to do it. So I say start with one. And plus, then you won't go crazy, because it's a lot to ask for.
I love that term you used about deputizing people,
right?
Getting people out there, as many people. And I think we, especially with volunteers, we forget that you don't have to be paid staff to represent your organization.
No.
Well, so I think that was a great term.
It's really important. And remember, communications goals are intrinsically related to the mission. If it doesn't connect to the mission, you shouldn't be doing it. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit too.
No, awesome. Just again, remember that if you are a Twitter user, we like to use the hashtag Aplos webinar, and I am at Fugitive DMK. So feel free to interact with us, or if there's a question out there that you don't get to ask on this webinar, you can certainly tweet it out or send us an email, that kind of thing. So
this is my Yoda wisdom for the day. If you get nothing else from this webinar, I hope that you are able to use this information. Before you go into any meeting, any initiative, any gathering, whether it's at work, in the organizations with which you're involved, PTA meetings, whatever you're going to, I say ask one of these questions when you have gathering of people. What do we want to have happen? Or what outcome do we want? That's the more businessy kind of lingo, but what do you want to have happen? Too many times we meet to no end, and we're just talking at each other and what have you. But if you meet and you ask, okay, we're sitting here, what do we want to have happen? Well, we need folks to know about our organization or one of our initiatives or whatever it is. What you do is identify what you want to have happen and then work backwards. And I know this isn't an epiphany for many people, but I'm always stunned at how many people continue meetings and processes, communications plans, prospect getting plans and everything without knowing what they really want to have happen. So I would say, if you can ask this in your business life and your personal life, maybe not in your interpersonal relationships, because that would be kind of rude. But if you're involved in organizations, I always say, what do we want to have happen? I do that as a consultant. I get paid to ask that question. And it's funny because they're like, well, we want this, but can't articulate why. Well, we kind of want this. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Why do you want to have that happen?
Jill, does this also have to do with simplifying your message and not getting too many things going at once, or is that a little different?
It could. you always want simple messages because we can't manage. I know my brain can't manage complicated messages, and I know there's some smart people out there who definitely can, but again, it gets caught in the clutter. And I think the most thing, this is helping you to get focused on what you want to have happen. And so that's a way to start. So we're going to talk about goals and objectives. And you're like, oh, this is like college. I don't want to talk about it. But you must, because I think a lot of our organizations get caught in the goal, which is a broad idea of what you want to accomplish. So like a goal would be our organization is the preferred children's charity in our town, or our organization will improve air quality in our region, something like that, something kind of broad in scope and scale. And it's like, we're an organization that does this. Objectives are very specific, and objectives relate to something that has action and a timeline and a measurable outcome. And I'll read a couple of those. An objective could be, we will increase the number of gifts by 20% over 2016 by December 2017. Or air quality measurements will show a 2% decrease in dangerous particulate matter by January 2018. I'm just saying objectives are very specific. And so when you're doing communications, you have a goal, overall goal of what it is you want to get done, whether people don't know you or they need to know more about something you're doing in the community or the world, that kind of thing. And then the objective is much more narrow. And in communications, we work off of both. But always remember, your goal has to tie into the mission of your organization. The goal can't just sit out there because it's a fun thing to do, or a well-meaning and important volunteer came along and said, you need to do this. Because if it can't pass your test, you don't have time to do all these things. And so I would say just, it's to get you focused. We agree, here's our goal, and our specific objective is this. So remember, it has an action, a timeline, and an outcome.
That's really good.
So there's different kinds of objectives. There's informational. I call this, I've kind of, put it in my lingo, we want them to know stuff. Now, remember, of all the objectives in the world, this is the weakest because it lives in the world of assumption. And when we want people to know stuff, there's a whole lot of hope that goes on related to this, meaning I sent out a newsletter. Now, I'm sort of anti-newsletter. I have to go on the record. Are you, Dan?
I'm borderline. Depends. I'm more electronic, and I'm more short newsletter kind of guy.
Right.
Too much information.
Yeah. And the thing is, a lot of times, a lot of our time is taken up with some of these communications efforts. And informational means we want people to know stuff about us. So we push information out. Well, we have to make sure it reaches, there's a lot of ifs, that it reaches the intended target, that it reaches them at a time where they're actually paying attention, where they pay attention and read it, where they pay attention and read it and understand it. And it lives with them. You know how many tidbits a day you're like, oh, wow. Oh, I watched this kitten video and I learned this about kittens and stuff like that. But then it leaves your brain right away. And so, when large corporations do launches in the market and they just want people to, Taco Bell's really good at this. We have this new product. I saw a Ghastly product the other day, though. And I won't say the company, but they've taken their hamburger product and wrapped it in a tortilla. Eat a taco. Anyway, they do billboards and online ads and newspaper ads and radio and TV because they're fighting for your attention. And they spend a ton of money to get your attention. So that's one objective. So it might be your objective, but just keep in mind you want to keep it as controlled as possible. We'll talk about that. Motivational. We want them to be open to us. It's a motivational objective. We want them to be open to what we're about to say. You're introducing a new concept. You're a new nonprofit, or you're a growing nonprofit, and you want more people on board who are within your target audience. And then there's behavioral. We want them to do something. All of these relate to knowing why you want to communicate, but you're trying to get people to do something. And that's the hardest thing of all, because people are very, you can influence folks. We all have our belief systems and this and that. And you can't get somebody who's a diehard fan for one baseball team to switch over to another baseball team, or a fan of one nonprofit to necessarily. There's always room for plenty of love. And people can love multiple nonprofits, and that's okay. And we know that because we run into that in prospects and donors. They support multiple, but we want them to be aware of us. And I think I was thinking about the last really, really effective behavioral public relations campaign was Mothers Against Drunk Driving. That they spent years changing people's behavior about, taking the keys from people when they go to a party.
Sure.
Friends don't let friends drive drunk.
Sure.
All that. And they did a lot of work, and it did change behavior to make it socially unacceptable to do this.
Yeah. I've talked about this group before, but one of the most effective web-based charities out there that I love is called Charity Water, charitywater.org. Really effective. They do all of this. It's in one picture. They can inform you, they motivate you, but they make sure, hey, your $5 donation or $20 donation will do this. I mean, at the end of the day, it always just moves me every time. So
well, that's saying something because we make decisions with our head and our heart.
Yeah.
And so you're sitting there going, well, I'm working at this nonprofit and I'm on this webinar that Aplos put together, and you're like, how can I do one more thing? I know I need to do it, but how am I going to do it? And I will tell you this, and I promise you this is true. And if you want, you can get a hold of me and I will coach you through it and tell you can do this. Communications plans help you define your work so that you can deploy what you have properly. And not just run around in circles. Because, it feels terrible at the end of the day, a week, a year, when you look back at your work and you were super busy, but you can't really identify what you did. Yeah, we're okay, but man, I was busy and I can't tell. Communications plans will help you focus. You can say, I use this resource to get this impact. This will keep you focused and on target. Because once you spent the time ahead of time planning, focusing on who you're trying to reach and why, and then deploying all your resources to get there, it'll keep you focused.
It's probably a lot like a fundraising plan, which we've talked about in the past. So
they're married for sure.
Yeah.
Fundraising plans shouldn't go forth without communications. Communications should never go forth without being tied to mission, which is probably fundraising.
Yeah.
This provides guidelines for staff and volunteers. If you have a communications plan, maybe you haven't experienced it, but every once in a while there's some loose cannons out there among our volunteer corps and
our deputies.
they kind of say what they want to say, and they expect for people to react to them. Donors might do that. I said this, so make it so. And you can politely say, that's great, that's a great idea, maybe we'll work it into our planning for next year, but we're following this adopted communications plan, so we are talking about this year, so that might help you.
I worked at Children's Hospital here in the community that work, and Jill knows this organization. And one of my jobs was to give tours of the hospital. And I remember one time giving a tour, and I had given this group some information about this particular area of the hospital. And one of the doctors overheard me and came up and said, well, where did you get that information? And I said, well, that's how we give the tours. I was 100% wrong. I was giving, it became a myth. And so it then dawned on us that, well, we should work a little closer with our communications department about some of the stories about how certain things were. So it kind of made me think of that a little bit.
You have your own urban legends. When you hear about poison cookies and crazy things that happen in movie theaters, and you go to some of these websites to debunk, you've got to make sure in your organization there aren't some of these legends around. Even to some of your process stuff. You do this thing, and you can sit in a meeting and say, why do we do this thing again? It's a safe place to do that. And same with communications plans can help you do that, because you question the method that you're doing things. I have this saying that, it'll someday get me thrown in jail, maybe, although it's on my list to stay out. It is rules are no substitute for thinking. We create the rules. Now, you might work in government or what have you, but if you're in a nonprofit and you have policies and procedures and they are not serving you and you're having to work around them, and it's not, you always want to be legal and ethical and impeccable at all times. However, sometimes we just inherit some of the stuff that others were having to work with, and we can adjust that. And believe it or not, communications plans can help you do that. And that's one thing that I say. But they also can tell you what's working and what isn't working. But I will tell you, you can do this and you should do this, and you won't go crazy, I promise. It will help you refine your work.
Are these annual? Are these a couple times a year? Are they based off projects?
It depends. It could be project. I do annual plans for my clients, but there's always check-in. Now, there's a brilliant campaign director out there, and this was her saying that she was a great teacher. Every time you met with her, you learned from her. Unfortunately, she's retired now, but she was a fountain of information for so many of us. That Dan and I worked with her, and she always used to talk about deeds over dollars. And I would say, if your nonprofit is communicating about money, that is not your mission. Your mission is not money. Your mission is the work that gets done because of that money. the lives that are changed or saved, the community that is enhanced, the whatever it is, the air that is cleaner, what have you. And I would say in your communications plan, talk about the deeds, not the dollars.
That's a great reminder.
Yeah, you're going to have a point where you're going to have to say the reality conversation. Yeah. We need X number of dollars to achieve X, but focus more on what's going on as far as what the projects are.
That's a great reminder. It's a great reminder because those who have been on some of the webinars on fundraising know that one of my personal MOs on fundraising is it's not about the money, but about the relationship or, the process more than the money. So that's interesting that fundraising and communications, there's so many similarities. They're parallel.
There really are because it's a lot of targeting. It's knowing what you want to get done and what have you. But, but sadly in both, there's places where we can spin our wheels a lot. You don't want to do that because you only have so many hours a day. And remember, as passionate as you are about your organization, they rent you. They do not own you. Although sometimes you might feel owned. I understand that completely. And if you're passionate, you want to be there. Yeah. But use your time well to serve your organization well and through communications plans.
Great reminder.
So deeds over dollars.
Yeah.
So first step in this, and you're like, research. I hate research. No, you don't, because you Google things every day. That makes you an official bona fide researcher.
Yes, Googler.
Yeah, and some of these you can answer probably now, but it's kind of like the SWOT analysis and things like that. But who's telling your story and how? And let me tell you, research is related. How I define it is what we know versus what we think we know. We operate a whole lot on what we think we know because we really can't pay for expensive research and all this stuff. It's what we really know. And the way we get to know things is by asking people and doing research. And research is fun because data is fun. And I'm non-mathematical. I'm non-scientific. I fix everything with duct tape and super glue. That's kind of how I run my life. However, I'm a research nerd because it's fascinating what you know versus what you think you know. And you're probably working with a lot of volunteers who think they know a lot, or people in organizations like, oh, I know that person, blah, blah, blah. One of my clients was, they were going along fine for many years before I joined them. And they were doing some things. And I'm like, why are we doing things like this? And I want to know. And they're like, they were listening to some key influencers. And the more I spent in that organization identifying, they weren't key influencers necessarily, because just because somebody is loud and persistent does not mean they're representing lots of people. And so I was able to do some research and some simple surveys to show what the loud, persistent person was saying wasn't representative of the organization. So unless you like doing bird walks and wandering around the world, research will really serve you and keep you focused and make your work better, because it's like, oh, that's an interesting perspective when they come tell you their crazy thing. But, the research has shown us this, and you smile and you nod. But I will say you can absolutely do this, and I'll talk about that in a second. But who's telling your story and how? What do people think when they hear your organization name? Is it a big blank like, oh, sounds nice, or doesn't sound legit, or what have you? I mean, you need to know these things.
And sometimes we think as nonprofit workers, we just assume that everybody knows our story or knows exactly what we're doing. And so that's a great reminder to know that, kind of get a pulse of people out there. Is that right?
Yeah. And is your story compelling and action oriented? It's not passive. It's like when you hear about the work you're doing, it's moving. When you, like Dan talked about the water, online charity, and, there's just some things that get you and they capture you and you're like, I want to know more. And so what is your story?
Good point.
Some further questions, what are you saying about your organization? And a whole lot of you say, well, not enough, or it's outdated, or what have you. But you can fix that. It's ultimately fixable. And then think about how you learn about your prospects and donors. What kind of things do you do? So I'll tell you some research things you can do that you're like, I don't have money. It's like, nobody has money for the important stuff, or everybody has money. One time when I was at a nonprofit, I had a strategic partner. What I like to do is run around so that everybody knows me, not so they know me, but for the benefit of my organization. It's like, how can we partner? So there was a market research firm, and I kind of said, oh, we're doing this for kids and blah, 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 blah. And, and I just kind of kept it up, and I'd send them a little note saying, look what the kids did. I didn't ask them for a gift or anything. But one time I said, I hesitate to ask. I don't know how much research would be, but I really want to find out what our what our supporters think of us and everything. They go, oh, we'll do some surveys and focus groups for you. And I said, oh, no, I know we can't afford that. We're just going to do it as your partner. I'm like, oh, beautiful. It's just developing that relationship. But you can do that. But you can also do online surveys such as SurveyMonkey. And let me tell you something. There's a funny phenomenon out in the world. When you ask people what they think, they will tell you.
I love taking surveys. Yeah, I love taking surveys.
Sometimes you take surveys because you get prizes or points. There's those online things for shopping and you get points and all that. Yeah. You can conduct focus groups where you pull in some key people and have conversations. I would tell you the key on that is a person who's leading the focus group has to be very not passionate one side or the other, very neutral, because otherwise they can influence people. And you don't want that. You want really good data. You can do secondary research. And what that means is you find some research in your field that was done by someone else, but it has applications to yours. And I can tell you on these online surveys and focus groups, they're not going to be as accurate as a fancy research, but they'll be within a couple points and you'll get some really good data. So, I mean, you already do this. You want to learn about donors and prospects, you Google them. You can also set online alerts if there's somebody or something you're interested in. Set online alerts so that you get when that shows up in news feeds. You can monitor social media sites and see what's going on that way. And you can also read websites and media coverage if there's if you're planning an event or some things. You can stay in touch with what's going on in your area for very nominal or no cost.
That's a good point.
But if you can afford to do research, if you have a benefactor or you can write a grant to do research, that research will serve you for a very long time and will keep you from walking up some roads you don't want to. And, and this has happened in communications, based on research, we target, we do our work, and then we see what happened. And sometimes we're a little off, but that doesn't mean we don't communicate. It means we adjust the communications. So
I've also learned that local universities many times have classes and students that need to do research projects. Yes. Would you say that that's a good resource?
Because young minds with new tools. Yes, brilliant.
Yeah. So a lot of social study degrees, marketing, PR.
And business schools, they're looking for projects, and it's a really nice thing. Yeah. You have a lot of resources in your town, even if you're in a small town. There's smart people there. You just have to unearth them.
And they don't have to be big, fancy research. I mean, even community colleges and all of that.
Big, fancy research is fun. And if you ever get the chance to do it, do it, because if I could get lost for days and then I don't work and I'm just playing in the research. But it also helps tell me what I know versus what I thought I knew. Yeah. So
once again, before Joe keeps going, just remember to, if you want to use Twitter, you can hashtag Aplos webinar, and you can ask questions. You can share this content, let people know that you're listening in, and all of that. So let's keep going.
So in research, the purpose of it is to identify your strengths, weaknesses, and needs, to learn about your competitors, and you're like, but we all love each other. But you're competing for the donor dollar. Yeah. And sometimes it's who's telling the story best and gets the attention, and not because it doesn't mean one nonprofit is more highly valued. It's just to that person. So because you're targeting communications, and in research, you're going to figure out who do you want to communicate to and why. Remember we talked about before, what are we trying to get done? This is research. Who do we want to communicate to and why? Is it a behavioral thing? Is it a motivational thing or an informational thing? What do we need from these people? Research also will test and clarify your assumptions as you formulate your strategy. And, it's just a way to find out everything you can so that when you move forward, you're moving forward and using your precious resources really wisely. You want to do that. You want to be a good steward of what you have there. So your donors and prospects inside out. What do they like? What don't they like? I remember one time helping a development director with a proposal in my communications role, and they were doing this big proposal to support some opera thing. And I said, she's telling me the couple, and I'm like, I don't think they like opera. Because I go to a lot of rock concerts, and they were always there. And not that they're mutually exclusive, but it just didn't strike me. I kind of knew them. Oh, no, they came to a thing and blah, blah, blah. So she did this big preparation and this big proposal and handed it to them. And they said, well, we were at the opera that night because some friends gave us tickets, but it's not our thing. So she hadn't done her research to know, what the motivators were, or to even to have a conversation with them saying, it's so nice to see you here. Do you like opera? Oh, no, we're here because friends gave us tickets. But, we'll see you at the Journey Tribute Band next week. But find out everything you can. You are now a super sleuth, a spy.
Yeah.
And come on, face it, we stalk people on Facebook and in Google and everything and LinkedIn because it's a good place to learn about folks so that we can serve them better and make sure that if they're the right person to support our organization.
So it's matching the donors with the right thing to make that right ask or whatever.
Yeah, we're going to ask them. So your very first step is research, finding out everything you can in your market and about those folks you want to communicate with. And then the next thing is developing goals and a plan. Research is going to give you some information and probably some aha moments. And you're going to develop a goal and a strategic plan. So it's like, who are our target audiences? What do they need to know? You're going to develop methods for adding value. And all that means is what you're doing supports your mission. And remember we talked about goals before? They're tied to mission. And you're going to say, okay, this is how we're going to get these things done. And some of the things that you've probably heard about in communications, some of the goals you might have, some people might want a media relations plan. You know, they want to talk to media. And I will say media relations is okay, but it's them. They're filtering your story for you. It's not you talking directly to your target audience. And whereas there's other ways you can talk directly to who they need to hear it. But a lot of people think media validates your events, your activities or what have you, or check presentations or what have you. And it's like every media contact is a way to tell your story. Never forget that. And I have a whole thing on media relations if anybody's interested. You might want an ambassador program so that you can connect people to your organization and then have them connect for you. It's the whole, I know a guy. I know a guy. And so you want to connect them. You might be trying to collect third-party endorsements for your organization. You might be doing events. The main thing is, how do you make your mission come to life? Your mission is not a boring thing on paper. And if it is, you need to change it. Because it's like, how does it come to life so people will want to support it?
Interesting.
And back to deeds over dollars. I would say you develop your goals. And remember before I said you can develop 5 goals, whatever. In a fully articulated communications plan, I often only do like 3, maybe 2. And I would start with 1. What is your main goal? Get that going. What do you want to do? What are the objectives? And get that going. But I would really focus with 1. And, you know, gift announcements, I want to talk about that because people put a lot of weight on those and they think it's important for the donor, and it might be. And I think it's important because people like to stick with the winner. When an organization's getting money, you know, people are like, oh, they must be doing something right because so-and-so supported them. So I would say definitely do that. But, you know, if media didn't show up, what other mechanisms do you have?
That's like the big check presentations and making a big hoo-ha that, you know, so-and-so got, you know, $5,000 or whatever.
Right. So, you know, people want to know about you. It's another way to get attention, but you know, really think them through on how the gift announcement illustrates your organization and your mission. If you're in air quality, you might be doing a public education campaign so people know how to do their part to help with the air quality. And then you're collecting donors to help with the work. So there's a lot of things. But what you do here is you develop your goals and your plan. What's going to happen? You're familiar with planning because you're a nonprofit, so you want your plan. And I have samples of those. If anybody wants them, just email me.
And again, we'll have all of Jill's contact information at the very end. We'll also give you an opportunity to ask some questions. So if you've got something in a burn-in, just hold on to the end and we'll let you type in some questions. And of course, you can reach out via Twitter or emails, all that. But we'll have all that information again for you at the end.
But I don't mind tricky questions. It's fine. Because I've been on the planet a long time, I've encountered a lot of stuff, and I know what it's like to be out there in a small nonprofit. I was executive director, and I had one person helping me, and that's all we had. But we were also able to increase our giving by a factor of 30. I mean, it was really remarkable, but it was through communication.
What I appreciate so far is that everything I've heard you say, Jill, is that, you know, all of this stuff, I mean, doesn't really require a huge marketing budget. These are things that you can do with, you know, with volunteers and low cost. So,
you know, and some folks might be able to develop partnerships with marketing firms or public relations agencies who will do pro bono stuff. But as in all things you do when somebody is doing it out of the kindness of their heart, I would say have an agreement and some specific time, because if they're doing it off the side, you might wait. They might say, I'll design your website. You might wait a year for that.
Yeah,
and that might
point.
not be reasonable.
Yeah.
And so make sure you both have articulated, well, we need this by this date and blah, blah, blah. Because sometimes we feel like we're not in the power position.
Sure.
How can we tell them that we need it by this time? And it's like, you have to, because you have important work to do and people are counting on you.
Yeah.
And so the next step is implementing the activities. So you've done your research, you know who you want to talk to and kind of what you want to say or what activities you're going to do. You've got your goals and your plan and hopefully just one thing to start with. Then you do the work. What are the activities you're going to do for each goal? This is where you communicate. It's how will you do it, how often, to whom, a timeline to keep you on track so that you can meet your goals. And then assigning responsibilities. Who will do what when?
Yeah,
it might be you,
yeah.
But are there some people you can deputize? Can you work with some volunteers or some partners? Or
it's a good way to engage your board,
students?
right? Can your board members be involved in this?
Absolutely.
Or, yeah.
If they can follow directions.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
No, we did a whole webinar on board engagement, and that's always that people, how do I get my board involved? So, yeah.
You know, I've dealt with through the years, this with public boards and nonprofit boards, it's called the amnesia. You talk to them about it, you go over it with them, it's in writing, and they get to the meeting, it's like, I didn't know about this. And I'm like, what is this strange amnesia you have? Please get over it. You want to create benchmarks to gauge success. So are things going? Have you met an obstacle that you can't overcome or that you have to overcome, but it's kind of slowing you down? But you want to check-in points all along. Some people will talk about there's earned media, meaning you get placements in radio, TV, and everything. You don't pay for those, but also the odds of them reaching your target market, like you get on TV, if somebody happens to be home and happens to have the TV on and happens to be watching you. I found locally in our market that while TV stories are nice, their Facebook pages have a robust following, hundreds of thousands, and they'll repost it there. And that's where a lot of people interesting and not can learn about it. Yeah. But there's also paid media, which is advertising. That isn't really a public relations effort, but you can actually place your message in front of a specific target audience and get it. So, the other thing is, I don't know if you've seen it, there's some organizations like One to Rescue Animals, and they have a long infomercial with sadness and pets that are just dying and starving and terrible things. And either people, I think they believe people are guilted into it and they will support that.
Interesting.
Or like me, I can't take it. I'm empathic, and being empathic, I can't take the imagery. So I change it so they don't get my money. But then there's another one where they took the shelter animals and they dressed them up in little outfits. And like, this little cowboy can be home with you and all this stuff. Yeah. And their adoptions were off the roof and their support was off the roof. So keep really in mind, if you're going to tell a sad story, do it compassionately and respectfully. And there's some really bad stuff out in the world, but know your donor. Some donors can take that and some can't. So as you're implementing your activities, keep that in mind.
I think the pendulum has swung a little bit. It used to be those really sad, like the dogs behind the bars. And I think that people are finding that the more positive stories, you gotta create a message that's hard, but to kind of flip it a little bit. So it's a good point.
And this, especially if you're in that, and it's okay to smile and laugh, because it's not because of the cause, it's because of you. People want to engage with you, to your organization. And, you'll learn the more you engage with folks, the more you'll learn about them. Yeah. And that helps your communications efforts.
A couple people have already asked if there's going to be a recording of this webinar, and absolutely there is. We within about a day of this webinar, we will send you all an email, let you know that it's available. We also have an Aplos Academy that you can go to get a copy of this, and also our past webinars. So don't worry, don't fret. We'll get those out to you.
So I included this because it goes along with, I'm assuming you're communicating because you're trying to gain support, either financial support or in-kind support or community support. So I included this in something I do with my clients. It's like, how do we know what strategy to use with the folks we're trying to reach, the prospects? It's kind of like a getting to know you stage. You're targeting prospects with your communication, or you're targeting influencers to get your work done, through them. So there's got to be mutual attraction. You have to be interested in them, but more importantly, they have to be interested in you. It's laser targeting. It's not like, I'm just going to communicate to those folks over there. And I used to do that when I worked for school systems. People in the northeast section of town are not interested in your school carnival in the southwest part of town.
Yeah.
They're just not, unless they know kids there. There's got to be connections. So make sure that you're using your resources carefully and you're laser targeting. You've done your research. Write less and experience more.
Yeah.
Give folks a chance to experience your organization. If you're doing backpack giveaways for school kids who are underprivileged, let your donors or prospects be a part of that. Come see it. Have them work. If you're saving the air, have them go to an event where you're doing demonstrations.
Yeah.
More experiences. People don't forget experiences.
Yeah.
We all forget what we read. I mean, anybody who's been in college knows that.
Yeah.
I'm a famous crammer from way back, but I always, you remember the experiences you have. So while you're going to communicate through writing, figure out ways to give them experiences or express that experience in a brilliant way through writing. Remember, this isn't speed dating. How do you like us? How do you like me? How do you like me?
Yeah.
It's a long-term relationship you're developing. And I know Dan's done webinars on that.
Yep.
It's key relationship building. And, I'm still stunned in my life that I can go out of town, like far, far away, and run into someone who I met years ago. And it's like, you just look at them. It's like, what are you doing in Chicago? What?
Yeah.
And it's these relationships you build, because I view all my relationships as long-term.
Absolutely.
I don't plan to know anybody for short term unless they're scary. But remember, you want to satisfy both parts of the brain, people's need for data versus what's in their heart.
Yeah.
And so you have to provide that.
I think most fundraisers would say that giving, for the most part, is an emotional response. But it's done, like you exactly just said, with a thought process. Cognitive. But it's still an emotional response.
Oh, it is. People don't give because there's a need. They give because they care. There's plenty of needs in the world that sit there. And they give because they care. My friend is a 3-time cancer survivor, and she was saved through a bone marrow transplant. So one of the things she does through Be the Match is she goes out as they're recruiting sponsors and supporters or big groups they want to affiliate with. And she said, I'm here today because this woman in Germany made a decision to do this swab in her mouth, and she has my bone marrow match, and I'm alive today. I mean, that's a compelling story.
Sure.
And so that's a beautiful way to do it. And I also say, let your passion show. If you don't have a passion for the mission of your organization, you're not the best person to run the communications or ask for money. We time out sometimes on these things. It's like we get burned out and tired, and I'm not saying run away, but get the best person who has the most passion that's and I won't say, because some people really go a little nutso on this, but it's the whole, they know you care.
Yeah.
That's all they need to do.
Yeah.
They just need to know you care.
Good.
Social media.
Oh, boy.
When I Googled this about how to help nonprofits, I just wanted to see what's out there. And let me tell you, what they're telling you is social media is your cure because it's free and blah, blah, blah. But you remember this because you heard it from me. Social media is seductive, but it is just one of the tools of the many out there that you can use. And the thing about it is it needs care and feeding. It's like a little baby.
Yeah.
Because somebody has to post, you have to monitor. The whole point is to interact. Keep in mind that for business and nonprofit Facebook pages, upwards of 90% have 250 followers or less.
Wow.
So maybe, but if it's a key 250, that's okay. But if you think that's your way to reach the world, that may or may not be your best strategy. But Facebook, you can nurture your engaged community. Twitter, it's fast moving, hot news, keep it going.
Yeah.
We're on it because we're fast moving.
Yeah.
Pinterest could be a really visually interesting way to connect with your people. Whether you're doing something in nature or kids or pets, Pinterest is a very visual medium if you can connect with people. There's blogs and podcasts and message boards. But just remember this is one of your tools because people are going to say, well, you can solve your marketing thing by doing social media. And it's, no, it's not really that way because what you want to do is always have two-way conversations with your target audiences. Yeah. If you keep pushing information out, you're not listening. You don't know what they have to say. So you want to create two-way conversations. And the only way to do it on social media is to be active and involved. My question is, who's going to do it? It's a 24-hour medium. I've worked for large corporations where we had Facebook, Twitter responsibility. And, I used to we would work all weekend, all night, all this stuff, except when we were sleeping, even though we sit on the page. And if you do this, say, responses will happen between 8 and 5, which are our working hours. And it's okay to set those terms, but don't let people sell this to you as the be all end all, because there's a lot of research related to social media and gifts. And while it's changing, people still, even in this generation coming forward, they want to know details about your organization, and a lot of them want to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
And, if I'm giving you money, I want to know more. And so social media is just one of your tools in your toolkit. It is.
And Instagram, is that kind of in there
that too? Yeah.
Okay, good.
I could have let, there's a zillion, right?
Yeah. Snapchat.
So once you've done your communications plan, you want to evaluate it. And this is just to say what happened. What happened. And I love this quote on here. What we say isn't as important as what's changed based on what we've heard. And so you're just saying, okay, we did this communications thing. These were our tactics. This is how we executed it. Did it work or not? If it worked, great. Expand it, tweak it, expand the target audience, what have you. And if it didn't work, really examine why. Was it timing? Did you go up against something really important? Did you, was there no energy behind it? The right people weren't in the right place. And, it's tough, but you'll sit back and you'll be analytical. You do this all the time anyway. You're always analyzing stuff. Stewardship, I just want to talk about a little bit. And Dan, you've probably done something on stewardship.
Sure, we have, a little bit, but.
Stewardship, is the administration of gifts and also the protection and care of your relationship with donors to strengthen and preserve the relationship over time. And this should be part of your communications plan. Stewardship can't be accidental. It's a key element of your donor relations, and it's a key element also in communications, because once you've made connections with people, it's like we had a campaign, we got all these people involved, keep them engaged. A lot of times people just let them go, and I'm like, please don't let them go. This is just your starting point, because small donors can become more significant donors as time goes on, and they can be big friends of your organization.
Great point. We actually did a whole webinar on stewardship, which is available on our academy. But we talked a lot about how are you communicating with your donors, how the past gifts are being used. In other words, as a donor, are they just feeling like, it goes exactly right. Are they just feeling like you're just asking them for more and more and more money, but never taking a minute to say, hey, this is what difference has made through your gift. So that's a great point.
And I say be impeccable. Don't, in any of your communications, don't just, if you're not the best spelling person in the world, do not count on spell check, because the bad words are in spell check. I will tell you that. Yeah. And your eye will forgive a lot. So hand it to someone. If you're going to do anything that's going out to donors or whatever, and this isn't your best skill, hand it to someone who's outside of your sphere of influence, your world, so that they'll go, well, I don't know what that means. I'll tell you a quick story about stewardship that resulted in a $30 million gift. At a university. One of the professors was at an RV rally, and he talked about his agriculture college. Everybody took a turn talking about something. He goes, I want to tell you about where I work, and talked about it and said, we have all these students we're teaching, and they're going through agriculture, and it's really important. And this one couple who'd never been to that university, didn't even live near there, said, oh, that's really good. They liked the guy, they liked the professor, they gave a $1,500 for a scholarship. And so the development director, they were probably 3 hours away from the university, would go and visit them every year because they were increasing a little bit. I think they got up to about $5,000 a year for scholarships. And she'd bring them products that the student farm produced and just visit with them and have a nice talk. And this went on for probably 15 years because they were
15 years.
15 years. These are really lovely people and what have you. And then it was a couple, and the man and the couple died, and the wife called to tell this development director, he's passed, but we have a gift we want to give because, we just love the university, even though they'd never been there. And they ended up giving the university $30 million.
Wow.
It was based on sale of land. And that was through stewardship. That gift was 100% through stewardship because they'd never set foot on the campus. They've been invited, and they're like, no, that's fine. We know you're doing the job, and they had great relationships. So stewardship's key. I'm not saying you'll get $30 million, but it's relationships.
Yeah, that's great.
I want you to
just real quick. I see some of you already asked some questions, which is great. We will scroll through them here at the end and get to you. So Christina and a couple of the others, we'll get to your questions if you hang on there. But thank you. This is a great interaction. Patricia, also, I know you talked about YouTube. That's also a great social media venue. So appreciate your comments and all of that.
I'm telling you, you can do this. You're sitting there going, oh, I don't need another thing to do.
Overwhelmed.
There's that saying, how do you get something done? Ask a busy person.
Yeah.
Because they'll do it.
Yeah.
Remember to follow your 4-step process: research, planning, implementation, evaluation. But start with that first question. What do we want to get done? and you learn and understand what donors and prospects want. Because when you're the in-house expert, you're going to save your organization a lot of effort and time and keep them focused on mission. Do not make assumptions. Always know stuff, not what you think you know. You can make educated guesses because you work in it day in, day out, hours and hours a week, but make sure you have something to back it up and let your passion show. And I will say, like I said, I would go around and make connections when I ran a nonprofit for children. I got to know the other people in town who were doing that. I got to know government agencies who serve them. I just went and said, hey, I just want you to know what we're doing. And those connections really paid off. And, they helped me with my communications. Like, I'm trying to get this done. And like, we'll carry that message for you to everyone. And I said, I don't need everyone, but do you have people age 40 and up who are interested in this? And, they would help me because we're all in it together for kids. And so it worked out well. Or you can partner with organizations that care about the same stuff you do. And then make sure there's no use so that, they can make connections for you too, because that's in communications. The world is always changing. The players change. Your target audience, people come in and people come out, but you want to make sure that your message is there, that they know who you are, and that you're worthy of support, in supporting your mission. So I will tell you that you can do this. If you need any help, my contact information is coming up, and I'm happy to answer questions, and you can email me, and I'm happy to do that too.
Yeah, great.
And then Aplos has a whole repository of smart stuff.
So we have our Aplos webinars or our Aplos Academy, which you can go back and get some fundraising tips and tools and suggestions and all of that. So really, I think in our kind of final thoughts, and then we'll answer questions is. What I hear, Jill, you saying is that really you don't have to have a massive marketing budget. Marketing and fundraising go hand in hand; they go side and side. But especially for those of you who are small nonprofits, where you're wearing many hats or balancing a lot of balls, I think the key here is to really utilize your communications and really leverage some of those simple steps. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I have a lot of courage. I'm not really an extrovert, but I do have a lot of courage. And so I will, if something is for a nonprofit, I'm looking at something in the community and I go up there and it's like, I work with this nonprofit. They're doing this. I think tell me about the people you're targeting. And, I can include them in as part of the communications plan because it's all for the good of the mission. And so anytime you're asking for help, remember, it's not you in a weak position. You're in a strong position because you're giving somebody else the chance to help your mission too. Yeah. And so that's another thing to think about.
Good. Well, we just have a few minutes so before we kind of wrap up, but we have a question from Christina. And how do we get people or them to engage in conversation more long distance on both Facebook and email or snail mail? I've asked questions, personal feedback, ideas, and I hardly hear back from anyone. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a couple of things, Christina. It could be that you're doing a great job and they're happy. And they're like, okay, you're fine. I don't really need I don't really need to talk to you about it. That's one possibility. And the other thing is really examine your content and what you're asking. If one angle isn't working, try a different angle. If you're asking head on, people who respond to this survey are going to get a free whatever, that kind of thing. Maybe they're not interested in that, but, change around what you're doing. I know a lot of people will go out there and ask questions. This is happening. What do you think about that? And then nobody responds. Whereas, our XYZ organization thinks blah, blah, blah is great. I'll tell you, the more positive you are, and when you give praise to other people and when you raise the conversation up to things that people can be proud of, that's because social media, can be murky at times. And when people are going through our feeds, there's a lot of serious and concerning stuff out there. But when you can raise it to a positive message and what have you, and you might be doing that. But I would just say you keep trying different angles to see what hits. And it might take a while because also make sure you're showing up in the feeds. Sometimes, people will promote posts. Yeah. But if you're going to promote something, make sure your target is there and make sure it's something that's really important to you because you're spending money on that.
So just a quick note on Facebook, for those of you who don't know, there's a great little tool in Facebook and it's called Boost Your Post. And it's pretty inexpensive. Some of the very, very small nonprofits use it. And for as little as $5, sometimes $30 or $40, you can boost your post, and then you can target your audience. And what that basically means is that whatever it is, it could be an upcoming event or some kind of post on your Facebook page will show up more in people's feeds. And so I find it to be a pretty effective, low cost kind of thing. And so like Jill said, maybe change your message a little bit. So great question. And so we have Karen who asks, how do you let your passion be relatable? Great question.
Well, passion is, it's part of your authentic self. And so sometimes people look at you and it's like, why do they think that? I don't understand. I'd say make sure you have stories that illustrate your passion. Don't let it just be there. It's like, our organization's the greatest. That doesn't give me any information about why. And it's like, last week we helped this many animals, or this air quality, or this or that. Make sure that you have a message that supports your passion, because I can be really excited about something. When people get involved in sales and they try to sell all their friends and they're passionate about it for a little while and then it wanes. Well, in this, you're related to a mission and it's speaking to your heart, and you have to tell people why it's important to you and have some stories related to your mission about why that happens, why it matters to you. And the stories are really what is key. And, in communications, we always say have an elevator speech. And that's something you write. It's 20 seconds. So when people says, hey, Dan, what does Aplos software do? You have a boop, 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 and you're trained in it and everything. People are like, oh, you work on this quick response. When you're sharing your passion, that's your personal, core belief, your authentic self. So make sure you have stories to support it, not just we're great and we help a lot of people, but we help this many people do this, or this many people get help for that. Whatever it is, but make sure you have some, and I don't want to say data around it, but remember, it's the deeds, not the dollars. So you want to talk about what you do and why it's important.
Great.
Because people will be going, they'll remember that. It's like, oh, I ran into Christina the other day and she said, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Wow. And people remember that.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you, Jill. I want to be respectful of everyone's time and super information. And we, of course, had Jill's information on that last screen, her email. Reach out to her if you want to interact with her a little bit more, ask some questions. She really is a great mind. And so, again, just kind of remind people a little bit about what Aplos is about. If you want more information, you can go to our website. If you're looking for some help in your accounting software, we're a real simple solution, as well as fundraising tips and suggestions. By the way, I just want to add is that the Aplos Academy, you don't have to be an Aplos customer to access that. Anybody can access that information. So we want to thank you, and we want to wish all of you all the best in your fundraising and marketing efforts out there. And
happy communicating.
Yeah, and we'll be back next month with another exciting topic. And I think we're going to start looking at year-end giving and some of the things coming up. So thank you all, and we'll look forward to talking to you out there again soon.